All right, this is going to be card review part 12, the last card review before the expansion comes out. We've got a lot of cards for this video. We have 2 cards that I missed before the big release stream, and now we have the big reveal stream coming today, later today, when I'm recording this, but we'll get to those cards later. For right now, we have the first 2 cards that I missed from before then. Let's go. First card, we had this card for a really long time ago. This card is late onto the list because I was waiting for a real translation of this card. It's not called Fluffy Squirrel Whisperer, unless it actually is called Fluffy Squirrel Whisperer. But Fluffy Squirrel Whisperer, it's a 1-mana 2/1 that puts 2 squirrels that are 1/1s into your hand. Is this good anywhere? It could be a good in Token Druid. I might try this card in my aggro token Odd Druid, but I don't know. It's okay. It's average. I'm gonna put it down for average, pretty all right. All right, I just want to quick say this in post. This card that I just reviewed is called Acorn Bearer, I believe. It was shown in the reveal stream. I just didn't want to re-record the audio. We got a lot of cards to review today. Next up, we have Conjurer's Calling, which is the last community card reveal card. This card is insane. It shows how powerful a card can be. That's a twin spell card. It just doesn't need the twin spell. Like, this card is just pretty good. You can play this card on curve with Khadgar on turn 5, and as long as there's 1 minion on board, preferably one that costs 4 that you played on 4, you can, for 2 cards, 5 mana, have 5 minions on the board. You add 4 minions to the board with this card. It's a huge board swing from 2 cards on curve. You don't have to do a lot to get that board swing. It's amazing. This card is kind of like a new evolve, except you're not evolving up, you're like evolving to the side. And one of the nice things about the twin spell of this card is that you, if you don't like one of the results of your Conjurer's Calling, one of your random minions, you can use the twin spell copy to get a new random 2 minions, and it's amazing. This card is insane. All right, now we're on to the cards from the final reveal stream. Let's go. The first card of the reveal stream that we saw is Potion Vendor, and when I first saw this card, I was like, wow, that looks really good. It's like a Fungal Enchanter, but it costs 2 less. It's like it's got the battle cry of a 3-mana minion, but it's 1 mana. Then I remembered, wait, no one plays Fungal Enchanter, so how good is the battle cry? Well, it really is, this is a card that begs the question, is how much is this battle cry worth? Is it more playable at 1 mana? I'm not sure. It's a little bit more flexible. Maybe we can see it in some kind of Heal Zoo kind of deck. Maybe Healing Zoo does still stick around here in Wild, and a card like this could see play. I think maybe Fungalmancer was a little bit too expensive for that, but this might be, it might be playable. Like we see that one card that no one plays, the Witch Doctor dude. That sees play in Heal Zoo, so maybe this might see play as well. The Witch Doctor has better stats than this, but I don't know. Maybe. I'm going to give this card a big solid maybe. Next card we have is Dalaran Librarian. So one of the things that they showed in the reveal stream is they showed us a bunch of new cards to support Silence Priest. And the problem that Silence Priest has had in the past is that you don't have enough silences that are good enough silences, and that you don't have enough minions that are good enough for the silence mechanic. And it looks like they tried to introduce more of those mechanics in this expansion. But for this card, let's look at how good this card is at adding cards to the silence pool. I think this card is actually a great inclusion because it's not just a single target, and it's not as bad as that one card, the 4-mana full board silence from Naxxramas. It's like a good in-between of those cards where this card lets you silence more than one thing, but it lets you control what you silence so you're not silencing everything. Because a lot of times when you're playing a Silence Priest, it's also a Divine Spirit Interfire deck, and if you're doing that, you don't want to delete the buffs on those by playing the full board silence, and this lets you silence multiple things and not have to worry about silencing those already buffed minions. So I think this is a good inclusion to the silence package. Next up, we have Arcane Watcher. This is a new target for Silence Priest that we just talked about. Obviously, this card is not as well statted for Silence Priest as Razorleaf, but I get it. It's only wild, and they got to print cards for Standard, too. I get that. So is this card good enough? It's decent. It adds to the Silence pool, and I think that's just good enough. It makes it so it doesn't have to just rely on the Divine Spirit Interfire thing for this deck to work. Also, one thing before I forget on Arcane Watcher, one of my friends had mentioned this to me. You could run this card in Odd Shaman, and you can negate the silence in it by giving yourself spell damage totems in Odd Shaman and guaranteeing that. So I thought that meme was pretty good. I appreciate that meme. Alright, we got another card that they showed in the Silence Priest deck, which is HenchClan Shadequill. Now, this card doesn't need to be silenced to work. It is just one of those like overstated minions with like a negative ability on it, but this card does work in other cases other than Silence Priest because it can attack. You can just run this in a Divine Spirit Interfire deck. You can kind of run it as a big zombie chow. You can run it in that one OTK deck where you just kill off a bunch of your death rattles and that restore health but make them do damage instead. It works in that case. But in a Silence Priest, this is once again not as good as Razorleaf, but again, standard Razorleaf not there. But once again, you're adding more silences to the list of silence minions to play for the deck, so it's fine. It's just fine. You could run in a Silence Priest deck and not even need to silence it. Next up, we have Convincing Infiltrator, and this is a very interesting card to me because it shows us just how powerful Obsidian Statue is. Obviously, this card does not have as good of stats as Obsidian Statue does, but it has the same effect, the same taunt and death rattle as Obsidian Statue, but without the lifesteal. And if this minion is powerful, which it seems like it might be, minus the stat line, it just goes to show how powerful Obsidian Statue is and how the lifesteal is just like a little bit over the top and making it just a crazy OP card. This card, however, I don't know, I think it might be pretty decent. That board controlling death rattle has seemed to prove pretty strong in the past, so I think we might see it. Now we got Wagglepick, which is Shadow Step on a stick. The card has the same stats as a True Silver Champion, which we already know is a good card, but that card also does something like healing you, and that's pretty good for helping you control the board and stay alive so the trades aren't as bad. Is the effect as good as the True Silver Champion's effect? I don't think so. Shadow Step is a really powerful effect, but this one is a random Shadow Step at the end of it that you can pop at any time once you get the first durability gone. So, is that good? Would you run this with a Shadow Step? I think in some cases. There's very rare cases where you'd like to have more Shadow Steps, and this helps you have more Shadow Steps, like if you're playing like a super heavy cycle deck where you just want to get all your cold lights back all the time. Even in that case, I think this might be a little bit too expensive. I don't know. I don't see this card, honestly. Back to the Silence Priest meme, we have Unsleeping Soul. It's an expensive silence for Silence Priest, but it's more than just a silence. It helps alleviate that problem of not having enough minions by giving you more minions with a silence, all in one card. All it requires is that you already have a minion around, which could prove to be a problem with how how Silence Priest has worked in the past. But if there's enough minions that work in Silence Priest as they're trying to print, then maybe. I think this card could do pretty good, as well as it's also not too overly good in Silence Priest, like a Divine Spirit Interfire Priest, because you can't cast this on a minion that you're already buffing, because it's gonna silence it first, and then it's gonna copy it, so you can't copy the buffs on it. Next up, we have Soldier of Fortune, which is supposed to be a new Silence Priest card. They put it in their deck, but I don't think the +1/+1 on the base ideal stat line of 4/4 or 4 mana 4/5 is good enough, and the downside is absolutely awful. I don't think you want to run this in any deck at all. Now we got Proud Defender, which reminds me a lot of, I think it's called Lone Champion from Kobolds and Catacombs, but it doesn't require you to have an empty board before you play it, which is what Lone Champion has. As well, it has a really good stat line, and it just counteracts that hindrance of not being able to play things ahead of time. Obviously, you can't have things on the board after you play it either for it to be good, which is a hindrance that the Lone Champion didn't have. But I think the stat line is pretty good if you're running this like in a control-y deck where you don't need to have a lot of things down on the board. You can just put out a 4 mana 4/6 taunt and it'll be pretty alright. Now we're moving on to cards from the next game that they played, which had the Warlock and the Mage, I believe. And the first card we have from that game is a Warlock card called Impferno. Now this card is really weird to me. It's like a worse permanent Savage Roar for Warlock that only works on demons, and it has a really weak board clear tacked onto it. I don't think that's good. So the board clear only does 1 damage, right? And generally in that case, 1 damage doesn't clear a lot unless you're coming up against like an odd paladin or something. But in most cases, it doesn't clear a lot. So how do you counteract not clearing a lot? In like a minion-based deck, you make trades to help the board clear. But you're playing this card that makes you buff your minions, so you can go aggressive. Do you want to be trading while you're trying to be aggressive? I don't think so. It's a weird mix of effects. Maybe you can do a bit of face and a bit of trading, and it'll work out somehow. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think this card is the right card, especially since it's specifically tacked on to demons, and you have to have like a demon-specific zoo deck where you're running a lot of demons for this to be even worth it, and I don't think that's how people are going to run Zoolock, honestly. Next up, we have Mana Reservoir. I could see this card being used in the Divine Spirit Inner Fire deck before I see it being used for its spell damage. Maybe Tempo Mage wants this card, but I don't think so. Next up, we have Mana Dart Frog. It's Flamewaker's little brother. Look at him. He's so cute. Anyway, how does this card compare to Flamewaker? It's actually kind of decent. The thing about Flamewaker, its power comes from being able to snowball, so having more Flamewakers makes Flamewaker a better card. So if you have more cards that work like Flamewaker, the better Flamewaker is. So you could play this alongside Flamewaker and make you can add some pretty good power to your Tempo Mage decks. Next up, we have Magic Carpet. Anyone want to play some Quest Hunter? I don't think anyone wants to play this in Quest Hunter. I thought about it. You could play this along Toxmonger, and then all your 1-drops have Poisonous and Rush, and that sounds pretty good. But then I also remembered that Houndmaster Shaw exists, and you can give everything Rush, and it's not a bad, poorly statted minion. So not even Quest Hunter, which was the only deck I could think of wanting this card, wants this card. I don't think anyone wants this card. Man, we got Mad Summoner now. We got some great, kind of expensive, but great anti-Big Priest tech as well. It's not just anti-Big Priest, it's also anti-Gul'dan. It puts a bunch of demons into the Gul'dan res pool, which messes that up too. Which is at first all I thought I needed, but you think about this more, you could also do the meme of on 8 mana playing this with Spirit Lash and just healing a bunch. That sounds bad, but the meme exists. I'm gonna acknowledge the memes. This is a meme channel. Is this card good? No. It is. It looks like it's specifically designed to be a tech card, like an anti-Big Priest, anti-Gul'dan tech card. But I don't think I'll give it much else than that. And now we got Jumbo Shrimp. Fuck. Jumbo Imp. It's just like Jumbo Shrimp, which is what I didn't mean to say at the start. Anyway, this card seems a little slow to me, but I would still keep an eye on it. It's kind of like an in-between between Corridor Creeper and Mulch Muncher, where Corridor Creeper, you needed to be in hand like this card, but it was very easy to reduce the cost of because anything dying would reduce it very quick. And Mulch Muncher, where it didn't need to be in hand, it was just in-game, but had a very specific pool of minions, being the Treants, that you needed to kill off to reduce the cost. This has a more accessible pool of demons. Demons are a lot easier to kill off than Treants are, but they're not as easy as killing off any minion, so it's a nice in-between. If there's a deck with enough demons in it, this card could work. Maybe it could see play in some kind of even lock. I'm not sure. All right, next up we have Kirin Tor Tricaster, which is a lot scarier than it looks because it has a lot of spell damage for a very low mana cost. That's +3 spell damage. The downside of making cards cost one more is not that bad. If you remember, Mage has a card called Sorcerer Apprentice, which can make it so those spells don't cost one more. They make them cost one less. It can counteract that, and you can also get multiple of those cards out on the board. You can have a board state where you have 3 Kirin Tor Tricasters to have +9 spell damage, and then you also have 4 Sorcerer's Apprentices, so your spells still cost 1 less. And like, let's say you have a hand full of Arcane Missiles, which is normally 1 mana, but now it's 0 mana, but they also now have +9 spell damage, so they do 12 each for, what's that, 0 mana? That sounds kind of scary. That's kind of a ridiculous board state to set up, I know, I get that, but it is something that exists now. That board state exists now, and I might try to make that meme exist now. But if honestly, you could probably play this in a traditional like freeze mage where your burn doesn't cost a lot, and you're probably already reducing your burn and this with Thaurissan, and then you play Alexstrasza the first turn, and then you just throw out a bunch of spell damage. I think this is a scary card, honestly. Next up, we have Sunreaver Warmage, which I think is a really good card. You don't have to do the build around a lot because there's already decks that exist that would want this card. Spiteful decks, big spell decks would like to have this card. As well, a lot of those decks, like Spiteful decks and big spell decks, would like to have their big spells in their decks, but this creates a situation where you're fine with having those cards in your hand instead. So it's 5 mana to deal 4 damage, which is pretty good control to help those Spiteful decks still work through the game. Pretty decent. All right, now we're getting into the next game that they played on stream, which was the Paladin versus, I don't remember, I think it was Druid. Anyway, we get to see some more secret cards, just like this secret card, Sunreaver Spy, which is pretty good. It's a totem golem that supports secret decks. Is a totem golem that supports secret decks a good card? Let's see. Yes, it is. I don't think I need to tell you that a totem golem for secret decks is good. Next, we have Mysterious Blade, a 2-mana 2/2 for Paladin weapon. Fiery War Axe died for this. Once again, it's more Secret Paladin support. It's not that hard to get this condition off, and you have, as we already know, 2-mana 3/2 is a very well-statted weapon that can do some pretty good, strong, aggressive things, which is generally what Secret Paladin is. The only thing that I like about this card is the fact that it can't be played in Odd Paladin. Also, I think this is a better weapon than the Headhunter's Hatchet, whereas it's got a better requirement on it, as well as I think a 3/2 weapon is better than a 2/3 weapon. Next up, we have the only Druid card we saw from the reveal stream is Blessing of the Ancients. My Odd Druid deck will always like to have more buff cards, but is this the one that I wanted? And I don't know, it's kind of expensive. I might try playing around with it. In token decks, it might work, but I think it might also be too expensive. It's 3 mana for both, so it's 6 mana for +2/+2 across the board, which might be better than we think it sounds, honestly. All right, we're on to the last game of the reveal stream, and we're starting off pretty strong with the Shaman Legendary Scargill, and this is an absolutely nutty card. Making your Murlocs cost 1 is ridiculous. This meme helps Quest Shaman a lot. One of the big problems that Quest Shaman has is you don't want to play the quest on turn 1 because that's bad tempo, and then if you mulligan away the quest, it might be hard to complete the quest. Well, some of the cards that they release in this Murloc package that we see in the next few cards is they really help you complete that really fast. And what Megafin really does is it helps you get that refill out really easily later in the game. You just play a ton of Murlocs like that. Or if you get this off of Megafin, it helps you just dump Murlocs really hard. I think 1 mana Murlocs, clearly insane. Next up, we have Underbelly Angler. Now, this is really the card I was talking about that helps us generate more Murlocs very easily. A Murloc that can generate more Murlocs will help complete the quest very, very fast. Even outside the quest, more Murlocs, always good. It's a better statted than, you can't remember what the Murloc's called, the 3 mana 3/2 from Un'Goro that discovers a Murloc. And it doesn't have as tough of a requirement. You just play Murloc, play Murloc, play Murloc. You get Murloc, Murloc, Murloc. Good card. Don't really need to say that. And last up for the Murlocs in this little Murloc package, we have Soul of the Murloc, which is a great little card. It helps your Murloc deck be a little bit more like a Zoo token deck, which is kind of like what it already was before, where you just want to plant a bunch of stuff and make stuff hard to remove and stuff benefits stuff. And you play this, and the stuff can still benefit stuff because it's hard to remove your stuff. Pretty good. I think this card synergizes really well with Primal Fin Totem and anything that just generates Murlocs pretty quick. Next up, we have Mutate, which is a worse evolve, but it's 0 mana. Is that good? I don't think so. I don't think Evolve Shaman even wants this, even if they're trying to full hardball the Evolve thing. I don't even know if Standard wants this, TBH. All right, next up we have Rapid Fire, which at first to a lot of people looked bad, but I'm going to point out that it says deal 1 damage, not deal 1 damage to a minion, which means this card can go face, which means you can combine this card with Malygos, which means if you have a Thaurissan Tick and 2 of these cards, and you got 24 damage right there. You add in some arcane shots and you have lethal. Is that good? Is lethal good? I think lethal is pretty good. All right, now we got Safeguard. This card is spectacular. It definitely gives Sludge Belcher a run for its money. But for 1 mana more, you get 1 more health over Sludge Belcher. You get... No, you don't get 1 more health. You get 1 more attack. Excuse me. You get 1 more attack. You get it being a mech, and both bodies on this being a mech, which works with Ziliax, and you get a better taunt to spawn from the Death Rattle. Do I need to say anything else to say that Safeguard is a good card? I don't think so. Now we're on to Toxfin, which kind of makes me think of Gentle Megasaur, but cheaper, where you're trying to get poisonous, but in this case you guarantee poisonous, but also it's only on 1 minion, and also Gentle Megasaur can flex to do more things than just poisonous. I think getting poisonous on a Murloc to clear through a taunt or something like that is a good idea, but I do think this card is better as a generated Murloc rather than a Murloc you put in your deck. Now we're on to the last card from the reveal stream. We got Ursatron. As any other wild player, it's just so happy that Mech Hunter is getting a support card. where you can just draw more cards. I'm not. All right, now we're on to the cards that they dumped just straight onto their website after the reveal stream. The first card we have here is Arcane Fletcher, which is a weird card, which feels like it's designed to help Quest Hunter, but is there any cards you want to like tutor out with this? It's a 4-mana 3/3, so it's already not good for a start for the stats, but is the effect good enough? I don't think so. You could tutor out some secrets maybe. You could tutor out Dire Frenzy. I don't think so. I don't think you want to tutor out any spells with this. I don't think that's what this deck is looking for. I know Quest Hunter needs support to work, but I don't think this is it. All right, next we have Arcane Servant, which there's not a lot to say here. It's just a River Croc that's an elemental. Is that better than a River Croc? I don't know. I feel like a lot of elemental decks have Vine Plays on 2, but if they really need plays on 2, sure, here's an elemental on 2. That's literally just an elemental if you want. There you go. All right. We have Azurite Elemental, and I'm going to start off by saying this card is probably bad. It's probably a pack filler, but I'm going to acknowledge the meme that exists, where if this sticks around for long enough, like let's say it sticks around for 2 turns, and then you play a Faceless on it, you double the spell damage that you got, and you got a lot of spell damage suddenly for 5 mana. That idea is stupid and bad, but I'm going to acknowledge that that exists, where you can just suddenly double the spell damage if this sticks around. Next up, we have Burly Shovel Fist. Is this an arena card? You bet it is. Is this a good arena card? I have no idea. It looks like one to me, but I'm not the right person to ask about that. Next up is Dalaran Crusader, and we're definitely getting into the arena cards with these ones. This card seems decent in Arena, but once again, my opinions aren't the one you should be asking for on Arena cards. And next up, we have Daring Escape, which is a nice little card in the middle of these pack filler cards. We have a really interesting tool with this one. It's like a much cheaper vanish for when you want to vanish your own things, and I think that's really good. You're playing a Mill Rogue, vanish your own minions back. You're playing like a heavy cycle deck with like a bunch of draw cards, vanish them back into your hand. I think this is a great little tool for Rogue. I love this card. Next up, we have Eccentric Scribe, which I think is the worst Violent Orb. Is this card even that good in Arena? I don't even think so, honestly. Alright, we have Faceless Rager now, and this might be a little bit of a sleeper card. This is a Rager card that gets rid of the entire drawback of being a Rager. Like, you can play this in, like, where you're, like, Mountain Giant, Drake, Warlock decks, your Handlock decks, and then suddenly you have a 3-mana 5/10. That sounds pretty good to me, honestly. And now we have Flight Master. We've got another card to counter Big Priest. Sign me up. This card is decent in like an arena setting. If you have an easy way to kill off the 2/2 for your opponent, it's decent. Next up, we have Hench Clan Sneak. I don't think I really need to tell you that this card is a pack filler. Next up, we have Heroic Innkeeper, which at first, to me, seems like an arena card, but it might be a little bit of a sleeper pick because it doesn't need a lot for this to get really, really big. If you're playing this like in a tempo deck, okay, it takes 2 minions on board for this to be a Lich King, but it can get really, really big. If you have a full board, this is a 16/16 taunt. If you have Bran out on a full board with this is a 28/28. This gets big really fast. I wouldn't sleep on this card too hard. Keep an eye out on this one. Next up, we have Hunting Party, which I can't see being too good outside of memes. It does like kind of add draw to your beast decks, and you can use it to copy Zombeasts, which is pretty fun. But I think this is mostly a card to create memes and combos, and that's probably what I'm going to do with it. Anyone say double King Crush or quadruple King Crush with Emerus? Sign me up, dude. Next up, we have Portal Keeper, which I'm going to probably say this is a bad card at the start. It's garbage stats, and I think the effect is too slow, but it's an interesting card because they've printed 2 cards with this unique portal mechanic, and I don't know why they did that. They're pretty much the same minion with different stats. I don't know. I think this is a bad card. I don't think the portals are good enough. I don't think it's good enough to wait for a 2/2 with Rush. Now we have Portal Overfiend, which is the other portal card. It's better statted than the other one, but it's still bad, I think. I don't think the portals are good enough. Next we have Recurring Villain, which is a weird card. It synergizes with Hand buff, it synergizes with regular buff, but it's still probably bad and not good enough to run. It's kind of like Xeric, but worse. And Xeric wasn't great to start. I'm going to give this card a no. Next we have Spellbook Binder, which might be a pack filler, it might not, but it is card draw, and it's a Novice Engineer with good stats. And if you're running a deck that has spell damage, maybe. Would you want a 2 mana 3/2 in the case that the spell damage isn't out and you don't draw a card? It's okay. It's an aggressive stat line for an aggressive deck, which is probably what you'd want to play this in, like a spell damage-based tempo mage. So maybe. Next up, we have Sweeping Strikes, which I think is better than it first looks. It's kind of like Lightforged Blessing, where putting this 2 mana card onto any minion of your choosing is really good. We've already seen that the Cleave mechanic is really good on Garrosh, and usually Cleave minions are poorly statted to make it so they don't work, but this can go on any minion, so you can, in a control setting, put Cleave on anything and make those trades work for you. I don't think it's like a tier 1 card, but I would keep an eye on this one. Next up, we have Tunnel Blaster, which at first looked bad to me, but then it kind of reminded me of like a Chilmar, a Primordial Drake, and we know Primordial Drake is a good card. This is 1 mana less for 1/1 less in stats, so it doesn't trade as nicely. We know that the 4/8 stat line is really good. We've seen it in other places as well, and I don't think the 3/7 trades as well, but it makes up for that by doing more damage from its AoE. So, honestly, maybe with this card. Maybe. Next up, we have Underbelly Ooze. I'm going to start by saying this is probably a pack filler. It's a 7 mana 3/5, but there is some big memes that you can do with this. Imagine a scenario where you can whirlwind this a couple of times with like a Pyromancer and then a few spells, and then you play Evolve on it. Yeah, you got a bunch of 8/8, or not 8/8s, you got a bunch of 8 mana minions. It's probably not as good as the Doppelgangster Evolve combo, but I like it. It's a big fun meme and I enjoy it, which is what we enjoy here. Next up, we have Vicious Scrap Hound, which is kind of bad on its own, but if you're running a deck that magnetizes minions, like with Ziliax, it can be pretty good. Imagine getting a swing of 5 healing from Ziliax and 5 armor from Vicious Scrap Hound. That's a 10 health swing. That sounds pretty good to me. It's also, because it's a Ziliax, you'd get more healing and armor gain in a swing. I think that sounds pretty good if you can magnetize this. Next up is Violet Spellsword. We saw a minion like this, but it worked with health instead of attack buff. That card wasn't good, and this one won't be good either. Next up, we have a Violet Warden. We've never seen this combo of keywords, because it's probably not a good combo of keywords, and this is also probably not a good minion. Next up, Whirlwind Tempest. Did someone say Mega Wind Fury? Hell yeah! Mega Wind Fury is probably bad, but imagine a situation where you can get this out with Alakir. I want to do that. That sounds like fun. Let's make that happen. Last up, we finally made it to the end of this. Very last card. Witch's Brew. I like how they printed an Echo card, and they didn't call it an Echo card. It's an Echo card, but it's not an Echo card. Even though, you know, throwback cards exist for all the other villains. Those exist, you know, the throwback cards, like the Omega Dude and the Forbidden thing. But this can't be an Echo card. We can't have too many mechanics, but we can have, you know, Mega Wind Fury, which we just looked at. We can have that keyword come back. No one cares. Honestly, that's probably why they didn't put it in the reveal stream. They didn't want people like me to bitch about this. Anyway, is this card good? I think so. It's a very good heal. It adds more heals to your control decks that need healing. I think it might be a little bit better in Standard, where they don't have Healing Rain, because I think Healing Rain is a better card than this if you're only going to be running one heal card. But they don't have Healing Rain anymore. Another thing that this card is really good for is it helps Yogg-Saron. We know that Echo cards or Echo spells are good for your Yogg-Saron, and if there's something that I like is buffing Yogg-Saron. So I think this is going to see some play. All right, that's it. Every single card finally reviewed on this channel. Thank you guys for sticking through this card review with me. I'm going to be streaming on Wednesday my pack opening, and I'm going to try and squeeze in some games, some first day 2 games. We're going to have some fun. If you can stop on by, come to twitch.tv/SidCorgia. It'll be down in the description for anybody who's gotten this far. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for sticking through this with me. I'll see ya in the Rise of Shadows.